I'm Bev Adams. I own an independent paper crafting business showcasing products from Stampin' Up. I made this project with products from Stampin' Up, and I sell the products and also a few items to make crafting more convenient. I have the free detailed directions for this project on my website. I'll also have the links, and you can just click the links for the products that you want to be taken to my store on Stampin' Up. You'll see where to find all of that at the end of this video, so don't worry about taking notes. It's time to put stamps, ink, and paper together. This card was inspired by Tammy Wilson, who is one of the Stampin' Up artisans. She's my friend, and she's also part of my Uplines group. So we were having a team meeting, and Tammy shared this card, and we were asked to make a card with her plan. I followed Tammy's directions exactly, but I switched out colors and stamp sets and other details and got a very different look. I will have the link to Tammy's directions on my website. I just love all of her projects, and I think you'll love them too. I used Celebrate with Cake for the cake, and strangely enough, I used Merry Christmas to All. I would have never looked to this stamp set for the word happy, but I used my Evernote notebook and searched for the word happy. This one showed up, and I thought it was perfect. I also used the Layering Ovals die and Well Written. Well Written dies have a billion different words. Well, okay, not a billion, but it has birthday. You will also use the Subtle Embossing folder. My inks are Pretty Peacock and Whisper White craft ink. I will also be using the Stampin' Up marker in Pretty Peacock, so you will need the 19 through 21 Stampin' Up marker set. You'll also want a stamping sponge. My embellishments are the Noble Peacock rhinestones. This is the 3/16 inch braided linen trim. My card base is Pretty Peacock 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 4 1/4. I have a piece of crumb cake for the inside that is 4 by 5 1/4. I have a piece of crumb cake for the front that is 3 3/4 by 5. I have a piece of the Woven Threads Designer Series paper. This is another thing that I would have never thought of. Woven Threads has kind of woven designs on one side. I think this whole set looks pretty feminine, and this card is for teen boys. And the front is pretty feminine as well, but I thought this one was perfect. I've cut this layer to 4 7/8 by 3 3/8. I will be doing most of my stamping on the crumb cake that is 2 3/4 by 4 1/4, but you'll also need a scrap for the cake, for stamping the cake, and a scrap of Pretty Peacock for the oval and also for the happy birthday dies. Probably the first thing you want to do is stamp the cake in Whisper White, because this does take longer to dry. And I want to have this nice and juicy. I haven't just freshly inked that, so very nice impression. I want to let that dry, and then I'll cut that out. And then with the Pretty Peacock ink, I'm going to sponge, and I like to kind of smear it off a little bit and kind of work that sponge. I kind of want to work that ink into the sponge a little bit so you don't get big globs of ink. And there's lots of ways you can do this. You can pat like I'm doing, or you can... Then I'm stamping Happy for Merry Christmas to All. I'm using the Pretty Peacock ink and just kind of stamping randomly, stamping off sometimes, tipping my stamp back and forth. I'll be putting my cake here, so I don't need to worry about what I do there, but I want to make sure that it looks kind of relatively random. There we go. And then I'm going to put this through the embossing folder. I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent for a little bit, but I think it's important. If you buy the subtle embossing folder right now, you will get the subtle 3D embossing folder. I bought mine a year or two ago, and it's the subtle dynamic embossing folder. And I know that that sounds like just a change of names, but it's really not. Let me show you what I mean. Since I got this folder during Celebration last year, I believe it was last year, I got this free. It is a dynamic folder. And I got the same folder. This is the 3D folder. I know it sounds silly to buy the same folder twice. I did it very intentionally because I wanted to show you the difference. Look at the difference of the thickness of these folders. This is the dynamic, this is the 3D. They both do a wonderful job of deep embossing. In fact, I think that this one may even be a little deeper, even though it's thinner. But that difference of thickness is going to make a huge difference when you go to use the embossing folder. With either of these folders, you do not need the thin die adapter. With the old thick one, you would only use, you would put your cardstock inside, and you would put one clear plate on top. And that was a perfect combination. With the newer, thinner 3D folders, you can do this, but you will need several layers of cardstock in between here as a shim to make up the thickness difference. But the easiest way to accommodate is to buy the 3D embossing plate, and this works perfectly. So since mine doesn't just say Stampin' Up, it has another brand name on here, I will need the one clear plate. So I'm going to just put my piece in here, close it up, and one clear plate. And like I said, with either the dynamic or the 3D, you get a very good impression. This is a very subtle folder though, so I think you can see that. So it's given kind of a woven look to it. So then I'm going to take the Stampin' Right marker with the brush tip. These have a thin bullet tip, and I'll show you. These have a thin bullet tip, which is great for writing or drawing lines. And then it's got the brush tip, which is great for coloring in areas, but I'm going to use it to flick some speckles. So I'm just going to put the tip into my cap, and I'm going to flick by pushing against the cap and then letting it slide through to the edge. And that gives a thin, and that leaves a fine spatter. And also a mark on my finger. You do want to kind of clear things away from your area that you don't want to be splattered, and kind of watch where it's going. And let me hold that up so you can see it. I have already cut those out. And I did make a point of saving the eye for birthday. I'm going to go ahead and layer the 5 by 3 3/4 layer on the front. I gave myself a little bit larger than normal border, and I can put the larger piece, the 4 by 5 1/4 on the inside. And these are going to some teen boys in my family, so I will be actually writing a note to them. I'll put my designer series paper on here, just directly onto the crumb cake layer. Again, this is a tiny border, so I want to be a little bit careful about putting that down. So I've got this patch of adhesive here. And I didn't measure how much I'm using, but I am kind of using a figure 8. So that's maybe a foot. So I'll actually cut a foot off and see if I like it. I don't actually just twist it around here though. I kind of like a little bit more control. So I'm putting one end there, and I want to have loops that are large enough to go be seen around that cake. So, and I can see that really I'm going to snip off this piece. So maybe 10 or 11 inches is plenty. I'm going to use Stampin' Dimensionals on the cake. And really just the top of the cake, because I want to glue or use snail, because I want to stick the bottom of my cake on my oval, and suddenly this looks a lot like a cake plate. And I will put some dimensionals on the oval. And I'm actually going to wait a second to put this on, because one of the things that Tammy often does is puts things down at angles. She loves texture, so I think she actually embossed. I don't believe she used a designer series paper. She used a different embossing folder. I only used one embossing folder, but she likes to have things at an angle. So I am going to put mine at an angle. But I want my cake straight, so I'm going to put my cake about there. And then I'm going to put my birthday, and I am going to use the liquid glue. I use my liquid glue a lot, and so it is handy out on my desk in my toolbox. I do have the fine tip glue, but I tend to not use it very often, and so I have to go looking for it, and then sometimes the glue dries in the tip. I do have replacement tips available if you have glue that dried in the tip. And then I'm kind of gluing that down in the middle and at the ends, so it kind of floats above the card a little bit. And I'm getting out my Noble Peacock rhinestones. And my favorite way to put on rhinestones is with my Take Your Pick tool. This end has some putty on it that sticks a little bit to the rhinestones, but the adhesive that's behind the rhinestones sticks more than the putty does. So if you put the putty on the rhinestone and slide it, and then I'm going to dot my eye with the first one, and the rhinestone sticks to the cardstock very nicely. So I'm going to just put some more rhinestones on. I kind of like to do groups of 3, but not in an exact triangle. And I just realized that kind of forms its group of 3 as it is. Here is the web address for this project, where you'll find the free detailed directions and links for the products I used. Under Shop, I have tips for online shopping, frequent shopping rewards, and products I offer to help you stay organized. I offer a cardstock sampler, taggers to help you identify those dies with lots of similar shapes, heavy-duty bags to store 12 by 12 and 6 by 6 paper, a replacement tip for the fine tip glue pen in case yours gets clogged, and a bow maker. Share my Evernote notebook of current products for a nominal contribution. It functions as a fully searchable catalog. Inspiration takes you to all my projects. If you're new to stamping, you might want to look at the basics. You'll find how to cut card bases and layers, what's special about Stampin' Up stamps, and some of my favorite tools. Under Organization, you'll find catalog tabs, labels and case inserts, a practically free stamp pad storage solution, a basic toolkit, as well as a compact desktop toolbox, and lots of color charts. You can take a tour of my craft wall. More organization means more time for crafting. Come stamp with me here in Ventura County, California, or get the best deal of all and join my team of crafters. The team is called SIP Together, and it stands for Stamps, Ink, and Paper Together. The team is made of crafters who want to save money on the products they buy, share with a few friends, or grow a business like mine. Be sure to subscribe to my website and on YouTube. I'd love to hear your comments. Thank you for joining me. Talk to you soon. Bye.